On a fog-drenched morning in Aspen Hills, Officer David Cole thought it was just another quiet patrol with his K-9 partner, Rex. But when the German Shepherd froze at the sight of a school bus rolling through the mist, his growls split the silence like a warning from heaven. What Rex uncovered beneath the wheels wasn't a stray animal or broken part. It was a hidden bomb, seconds away from disaster. Within moments, David, Rex, and an entire busload of children would be thrust into a battle against fear, fate, and the shadow of evil. This is a story of instinct, courage, and a miracle that arrived on 4 paws. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments so we can see how far this story travels. The town of Aspen Hills awoke under a shroud of fog that clung to the mountainsides like a stubborn ghost. It was early October, the kind of autumn morning where the air carried both damp pine and the metallic taste of frost. The county road stretched in a gray ribbon through farmland and forest, its surface wet with dew and slick enough to reflect the occasional blur of headlights. The world felt muffled, as though someone had wrapped the valley in wool. Officer David Cole, 38 years old, guided his patrol SUV down that lonely stretch. He was a man built for endurance, 6'1", broad-shouldered, his movements measured like a craftsman sharpening steel. His face carried the weathering of years outdoors, angular cheekbones, a jaw dusted with stubble, and faint lines at the corners of his blue eyes that hinted at both weariness and vigilance. Those eyes, ice-pale in the morning gloom, had once been softer before the accident that claimed his younger brother 5 years earlier. Since then, his gaze had held a quiet gravity, the kind of look that searched for danger even in calm moments. His uniform was neat to the point of ritual. Boots polished to a dull shine, radio clipped on his chest, and a duty belt carefully balanced, never cluttered. He wasn't a man of flash or drama. His officers often joked that he treated every shift like a meditation. Yet beneath that calm exterior lay a core of steel, forged by both grief and responsibility. In the back of the SUV, separated by a steel mesh, sat Rex, a 5-year-old German Shepherd. Rex's coat was a dense sable, black sweeping across his back and fading to tan along his flanks. His amber eyes were steady, thoughtful, eyes that seemed too intelligent for a dog. Weighing just over 80 pounds, he carried himself with a mixture of dignity and raw readiness. Rex had been trained from puppyhood in scent detection, tracking, and explosives work. Unlike some K-9s who burned hot with aggression, Rex was deliberate, calm, until the moment action was required. His left ear bore a small notch from an old search and rescue mission, an imperfection that seemed to make him all the more distinguished. The partnership between man and dog was one of routine and quiet trust. David spoke little while driving, but Rex knew his moods, could sense when his handler's thoughts drifted dark. And in turn, Rex offered silent companionship, a steady heartbeat in the fog. The radio crackled occasionally with mundane chatter, an alarm tripped by wind, a report of a missing trash can lid, a deputy calling in for coffee at the diner. David sipped his own lukewarm coffee from a battered thermos, eyes steady on the ribbon of road ahead. The fog was heavy here, so thick it swallowed sound. Fence posts appeared like specters, vanishing just as quickly. They rolled past the feed store on the edge of town. Outside stood Alma Brine, the owner, bundled in a burgundy cardigan. Alma was in her late 60s, hair a soft, white crown tied back with a pencil. She was short but sturdy, with the kind of presence that could silence a rowdy room of teenagers. She raised a hand in greeting, her expression both tired and warm. David nodded back, noting automatically the crooked "Help Wanted" sign in her window. He filed it away, as he always did with the small details of the town. Half a mile beyond, the road narrowed and dipped. Fog pooled in the hollows like liquid silver. Rex, who had been resting with his head on his paws, suddenly shifted. His ears pricked, his nose lifted. He inhaled sharply, nostrils flaring. The change in posture was subtle but unmistakable. David felt it before he fully saw it, his partner's alertness. He eased his foot off the accelerator, letting the SUV drift slower. His hands tightened slightly on the wheel. He trusted Rex's instincts more than his own eyes in weather like this. Then, through the fog, twin red halos appeared ahead. They resolved into the taillights of a school bus, chugging patiently along the road. Its faded yellow paint looked almost gray in the mist. Bus number 12, David realized, recognizing the duct tape patch by the rear emergency hatch. He'd seen it 100 times before. The bus lumbered forward at 20 miles per hour, steady but vulnerable. Inside were children, backpacks slumped beside them, faces pressed against windows, mourning rituals unfolding unseen. David's jaw tightened. He always felt a sense of guardianship when driving behind a bus. They carried the town's future, and he knew how fragile safety could be. Rex's focus sharpened. He rose fully onto all fours, muscles coiled, tail stiff. His amber eyes locked onto the underside of the bus. Then came the sound. A growl, low and resonant, vibrating through the steel of the SUV. It wasn't the sound of aggression. It was the sound of warning. David cracked his window. The cold, damp air slid in, bringing with it the layered scents of pine, diesel, and wet earth. Beneath it all, faint and acrid, was something metallic and wrong. To most noses, it would have been invisible. But Rex had already named it. The SUV hummed forward until David could see more clearly. The bus driver's silhouette leaned close to the windshield, a man in his 60s with a knit cap pulled low. Even through the fogged glass, David saw the set of his shoulders, upright, careful, the posture of a man who carried both responsibility and weariness. Rex gave a sharp bark, sudden and commanding. The sound sliced through the fog like a bell. David's pulse jumped. He flicked his lights to a steady glow, signaling the bus to slow. The brake lights flared red against the mist, and the bus began to decelerate, rocking gently as it came to a roll. Children shifted inside, shadows against fogged glass, some curious, some unaware. David steered his SUV closer, giving the universal signal for the driver to stop completely. The bus door hissed open with weary hydraulics. David stepped, out into the morning, boots crunching on wet gravel. The fog kissed his face, cold and intimate. He raised a steady hand toward the driver, his other hand resting lightly near his flashlight. "Stay put," he called, voice calm, steady, words meant to reassure the kids who might be listening. Behind him, Rex pressed against the mesh, eyes blazing, ears forward, body vibrating with restrained urgency. His growl had grown deeper now, steady as a drum beat. Every line of his frame pointed at the rear wheels of the bus. David paused at the bus's quarter panel, palm brushing against the cold steel. For a moment, he thought he felt something beneath the vibrations of the idling engine, a faint tremor, a whisper hidden in metal. He straightened, breathing slowly, eyes on his partner. Rex froze, hackles raised in a rigid line along his back, ears speared forward, tail stiff. Then he loosed a guttural sound, part growl, part command, a warning that brooked no denial. His gaze was locked beneath the bus, amber eyes burning through the fog. David's breath tightened. Whatever lay hidden there, Rex had found it first. The day had just shifted. The school bus rumbled to a full stop. its brakes squealing against the damp pavement as a low fog wrapped itself around the yellow body like a shroud. Inside, the chatter of children quieted into a nervous hush. Officer David Cole stood near the front bumper, one hand raised firmly to the driver, the other resting loosely near his belt, his posture calm but charged with vigilance. Behind him, Rex exploded into action, barking in deep, rhythmic bursts that carried across the road with the urgency of a siren. The bus driver leaned out of the window, his knit cap pulled low over thinning gray hair, his brows knitted together in confusion. His name was Walter Briggs, a 62-year-old man who had driven buses for decades. Walter had a body shaped by years of long hours behind the wheel. Slightly stooped shoulders, narrow frame, a paunch at his midsection. His face, lined with weather and fatigue, bore a thick mustache streaked with white. Though cautious and reserved by nature, Walter carried the air of a man who had been steady all his life, the kind who worked without complaint. He lost his wife to illness a few years earlier, and since then, loneliness had made his eyes softer, yet his demeanor more guarded. He prided himself on protecting the children who rode his bus, and now that instinct bristled as he saw the officer's hand signaling him to stay put. "What's going on?" Walter's voice, gravelly from years of early mornings, cut through the crackle of the engine. David gave a short nod, keeping his tone measured so the kids inside wouldn't panic. "Keep the doors shut for now. Something's not right." Rex sprinted toward the rear of the bus, his claws clattering against the wet gravel, tail stiff, ears pricked like radar. He circled the vehicle once, barking sharply, then stopped at the right rear wheel arch, his nose pressed low to the ground, his growl rumbling in waves that made the bus's metal skin vibrate faintly. He pawed at the pavement, then leapt back, barking again with a force that carried conviction. Walter shifted uneasily in his seat. "That dog's scaring the kids." Inside, faces pressed against fogged windows, round eyes wide, some mouths open with whispers, others biting their lips in worry. One girl near the front seat, about 11 with long braids and freckles dusting her pale cheeks, clutched her backpack tightly. Her name was Lucy Garner, shy by nature, small for her age, with a high-pitched voice that often went unheard in groups. She glanced at her friend beside her, who tried to reassure her with a small nod, but Lucy's instincts mirrored the dog's. Something was wrong. David walked slowly toward the back of the bus, every step deliberate. He crouched near Rex, who shifted his weight forward, nostrils flaring as though inhaling the truth buried beneath steel. David's hand brushed along the dog's back, feeling the tight coil of muscle under his thick coat. "What do you smell?" "Partner," he muttered, though the answer was already clear in the animal's unrelenting focus. Rex let out a sharp bark, so close to the metal that it rang like a struck drum. Then he backed away, circling again, returning always to that same spot. His intelligence radiated in every move. This wasn't curiosity. It was certainty. Walter climbed down from the driver's seat, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. He was careful, cautious, pulling his jacket tighter around his thin frame as he approached. His gray eyes darted from David to Rex, searching for reassurance he wasn't finding. "You think there's something under there?" David's blue eyes locked with his. "I think my dog doesn't lie." Walter rubbed at his mustache, nervous energy betraying him. He had seen accidents before, flat tires, broken axles, leaking fuel lines. But this was different. The dog's insistence shook him. David raised a hand to keep Walter from coming closer. "Step back, Mr. Briggs. Stay near the front. I need everyone calm." The air thickened with silence, punctuated only by Rex's growls. The fog swirled around them, wrapping the scene in a kind of surreal stillness. Inside the bus, children whispered. Lucy pressed her face to the glass again. She had a sensitivity that made her notice what others ignored, often teased by classmates for being too jumpy. But her eyes locked on Rex, and a strange steadiness rose inside her. She whispered to the boy beside her, "He's trying to save us." The boy scoffed nervously, but Lucy held her gaze, believing what others doubted. David's training and instincts converged into a single conviction. Rex was alerting to something hidden, something dangerous. He felt the weight of responsibility settle like armor across his chest. He tapped his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Cole. I've got a situation with Bus 12 on County Road 17. Possible hazard beneath the vehicle. Request immediate backup and standby guidance." The radio crackled with static. Then a voice responded, calm but taut. "Copy that, Officer Cole. Backup en route. Keep the area contained." Walter paled, his weathered hands tightening around the strap of his jacket. "You're saying a bomb?" The word hung in the fog like a shadow. David didn't answer directly, but his silence spoke enough. "Stay calm." "Don't use that word around the kids. Let me handle this," Rex barked again, this time so forceful that Lucy inside the bus gasped. She whispered louder now, her conviction spreading. "He knows. The dog knows." Her words rippled among the children, fear growing like a wave. David's gaze swept over the group of small faces pressed against the windows. He raised a steady hand in a silent gesture. Patience. Trust. His eyes softened, even as his jaw hardened. He crouched lower near the wheel well, the mist condensing in droplets across his brow. He didn't touch anything. Training screamed against it. But he listened to Rex, watched every twitch of the dog's muscles, every shift of his breathing. Rex whined once, a sound almost mournful, then growled again with renewed urgency. That was enough. David rose, turning sharply to Walter. "We're not moving this bus." "Keep it stopped. I'll start an evacuation." The driver swallowed hard, nodding slowly, his hands trembling as he clutched the side mirror for balance. He wasn't a man easily shaken, but the sight of the German shepherd refusing to yield etched a new kind of fear into his bones. David keyed the radio again, his voice firm now. "Dispatch, confirm. Initiating evacuation of Bus 12. Keep emergency response updated." And as the words left his mouth, Rex's barking intensified into a storm, circling the rear of the bus as if daring the hidden danger to reveal itself. The quiet morning of Aspen Hills had turned into something else entirely. An hour that would demand courage, instinct, and choices no one had expected when the sun rose over the fog. The fog had grown denser by the minute, so thick it seemed to erase the world beyond a few feet. The school bus idled on the narrow county road, its engine grumbling like a restless beast. Officer David Cole stood firm, his expression carved into stone as his voice rang out with authority that left no room for hesitation. "Mr. Briggs, open the doors. We're moving the children out." Now the driver, Walter Briggs, swallowed hard, his weathered hands gripping the lever before he finally pulled it. The hydraulic door sighed open, and the first uncertain faces peered down the steps. Their eyes were wide, reflecting the flashing patrol lights that cut through the gray morning. David raised both arms, palms up, and spoke with a calm steadiness that belied the urgency clawing at his insides. "Everyone out, nice and easy. Line up by the fence. Stay together one by one." The children filed out. Some clutched backpacks to their chests as though fabric could shield them. Others glanced fearfully at the barking German shepherd circling the rear of the bus. The cold mist beaded on their jackets and hair, their small breaths blooming like smoke in the air. David's sharp eyes scanned each child as they passed, counting, measuring, making sure none were left behind. Among them was Mia Patterson, a teacher's aide in her mid-20s, who had volunteered to ride along on the morning routes. She was tall, slender, with chestnut-brown hair tied back in a loose braid, and skin that carried the pale softness of someone unaccustomed to early mornings. Her hazel eyes, usually gentle and curious, were sharp with worry now as she guided the last group of children off the bus. Mia had chosen education after nursing school proved too heavy on her spirit. She was compassionate but fragile when confronted with violence. Still, she forced her voice steady as she told the children to keep close. Lucy Garner, the small 11-year-old with the braids and freckles, was the last to step off with Mia's hand on her shoulder. She whispered to the teacher's aide, "The dog was right, wasn't he?" Mia gave no answer, only a fleeting look at David that betrayed the same dreadful suspicion. When the last pair of sneakers hit the damp gravel, David nodded firmly to Walter. "Stay with them." "Keep them calm," Walter, still pale, adjusted his cap and forced a reassuring smile for the children, though his trembling hands betrayed his fear. Rex barked once, sharply, like a command. He stood rigid near the rear wheel arch, muscles taut beneath his sable coat. His eyes locked on the dark cavity under the bus. David drew a deep breath, unclipped his flashlight, and crouched low to the wet ground. He angled the beam into the narrow space. For a heartbeat, there was only shadow and the metallic gleam of axles and bolts. Then the light caught something foreign. A small box affixed to the frame with black tape, wires coiled neatly like veins of some mechanical heart. A red diode blinked steadily, a single pulse of light in the darkness. David's chest tightened. He recognized it instantly. Not debris, not a mechanical fault. This was deliberate, a bomb. His jaw set hard, his molar grinding against the scarred chip from years ago. He felt the weight of the moment press against him. 20 children, a bus, a town's peace, balanced on a thin thread of wire and timing. He forced himself to stay composed, to think. Rex let out a guttural growl, as though he too understood the gravity of the find. David stood, sweeping his eyes over the fog-veiled road. His voice dropped low but steady. "Confirmed device, wires, timer light. Everyone stays back." Mia covered her mouth with one hand, her hazel eyes wide with shock. Lucy clung tighter to her backpack, her own face pale but defiant in a strange, quiet way, as though some part of her already knew danger had been lurking. Walter exhaled a shaky breath, his mustache trembling as he muttered, "Dear Lord." David keyed his radio, his tone clipped and professional. "Dispatch, this is Officer Cole. Confirmed explosive device on Bus 12. Request bomb squad and immediate perimeter lockdown." "I repeat," device confirmed. Static answered, then a tense voice crackled back. "Copy that, Officer Cole. Bomb squad en route. ETA 35 to 40 minutes. Hold position and secure." The word struck David like ice. 35 minutes with a live bomb inches from where children had been sitting. His hand tightened on the flashlight until the knuckles turned white. He glanced back at Rex, who paced in a small circle, restless but focused, his amber eyes burning with purpose. David turned to the group, his voice louder now, commanding. "We're safe for the moment, but nobody moves closer to the bus. Stay with Mr. Briggs and Miss Patterson. Keep the kids calm." Mia nodded, her hand trembling slightly as she guided Lucy and the others farther down the shoulder, gathering them like chicks under a wing. Walter kept his frame stiff, standing tall, though his pale face betrayed the terror beneath. He spoke softly to a pair of younger boys, telling them everything was fine, that this was just a precaution. The fog swirled thicker around the bus, the blinking diode beneath it pulsing like the beat of a heart hidden in the dark. David stared at that faint light, each blink hammering into his chest, knowing the smallest mistake could turn the quiet morning into tragedy. Rex pressed close to his side, muscles quivering, the dog's presence anchoring him. David whispered under his breath, words meant for his partner and for himself. "We found it. That's what matters. Now we hold." The growl from Rex was low but steady, a promise echoing in the mist. The discovery was no longer suspicion. It was certainty. Beneath the bus, strapped to steel, a bomb ticked away the seconds of their fragile morning. The air grew heavier as the discovery sank in. Fog pressed against the shoulders of everyone on that lonely road, and even the children felt it, their voices tapering to anxious whispers. Officer David Cole lifted his radio again, pressing the call button with a firm thumb, his voice carrying none of the turmoil inside. "Dispatch, this is Cole. We have confirmed explosive device on bus 12. Repeat, confirmed. Request immediate EOD response, additional patrol units for traffic control, and paramedic standby. Urgency high." The line crackled, then dispatch's voice returned, measured but tense. "Copy, Cole. Bomb squad notified. State police en route. ETA approximately 35 minutes. Hold position, maintain perimeter, keep evacuees safe." David clipped the radio back and turned toward the gathered children. They stood along the fence line, their colorful jackets dulled by the mist. A few held hands, others hugged backpacks like lifelines. The fear in their young faces pressed hard against David's chest. He adjusted his stance, shoulders square, projecting calm he didn't fully feel. "Listen to me," he said, voice steady. "You're safe. You did everything right. We stay together, we stay calm, and we wait for help." His eyes met each cluster of small faces, anchoring them. Rex stood sentinel near the rear of the bus, his paws planted, tail rigid, eyes locked on the undercarriage. Every muscle in his body hummed with purpose. His ears swiveled at every sound, the flap of wings in the trees, the crunch of shifting gravel. But his gaze never left the blinking red diode. To the children, his presence was both terrifying and comforting. A beast on edge, yet entirely their protector. From the group, a boy began to sob, the sound sharp and broken in the fog. Another child, a girl with dark curly hair tied in mismatched ribbons, pulled him close, whispering to him like she had whispered to her younger brothers countless times. Her name was Naomi Fields, 9 years old, small-framed with warm brown skin and wide eyes that usually brimmed with laughter. Today they shimmered with tears, but she wrapped her arms around the boy beside her, showing a resilience that belied her years. David noticed and gave her a nod of respect. Sometimes the youngest carried the strongest hearts. Walter Briggs, the bus driver, hovered near the children, trying to mask his own dread with words that came out too stiff. His hands shook as he adjusted his cap, his voice cracking slightly. "Everything's fine, kids. Just a little mechanical problem." His lie was clumsy but well-meaning, the kind of unconvincing reassurance adults use when the truth is unbearable. Beside him, Mia Patterson knelt to eye level with Lucy Garner, smoothing back the girl's braid. "You're safe, sweetheart," she murmured. Lucy, still pale, clutched Mia's sleeve and whispered, "He saved us." The dog. He knew Mia's throat tightened, but she forced a smile and kissed Lucy's forehead, silently agreeing. Minutes passed like stones dragging across glass. Every second seemed to stretch, punctuated by the hiss of the bus's cooling engine and the muffled whimpers of frightened children. David paced slowly, scanning the tree line, the road beyond, every shadow in the fog. His hand brushed the flashlight clipped to his vest, his other resting near his holster. not because he expected a human threat, but because readiness was as natural as breathing. Then came the distant wail of sirens, muted at first, then growing clearer through the mist. Relief flickered across the children's faces as red and blue lights pierced the fog. A patrol car rolled up first, tires crunching wet gravel, its spotlight sweeping the roadside. The driver was Deputy Mark Delgado, 42, built broad and steady as an oak. His dark hair was cropped close, his jaw square and shadowed with stubble that seemed perpetual. His gray eyes carried the weight of a man who had seen too much. Combat tours overseas before joining the sheriff's department had left him disciplined but cautious, his warmth hidden beneath layers of reserve. He climbed out, his tan sheriff's jacket thick against the chill, boots heavy on the ground. Despite his stern face, he gave David a curt nod that conveyed trust. "Morning, Cole. Dispatch said you've got trouble behind him." Another patrol car pulled in. From it emerged Deputy Grace Holloway, 35, tall and athletic with sandy blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. Her skin was lightly freckled, her features sharp, her stride purposeful. Grace had a reputation for her no-nonsense attitude and an instinctive knack for handling crises, traits born from growing up the eldest of 5 in a household where responsibility was never optional. She scanned the scene quickly, her green eyes sharp, assessing the children, the bus, and finally the dog that remained fixated on danger. David met them halfway, keeping his voice low but firm. "Confirmed device under the rear frame, wires and blinking diode. Bomb squad ETA 35 minutes. I've evacuated all kids." Mark's jaw flexed. "You did the right thing." His eyes cut to Rex, who barked once in grim affirmation. "And your dog did too." Grace exhaled slowly, her expression tightening. "We need a cordon. Keep this road clear until EOD gets here. And those kids..." She glanced toward the fence line, where Naomi still held the crying boy, and her voice softened a fraction. "They need to be distracted, or fear's going to spread fast." David nodded. "Walter and Mia are with them, but we need to keep them steady. Can you two set up the perimeter?" "On it," Mark replied, already moving to his cruiser to set flares, his strides deliberate. Grace followed, directing traffic control even though no cars had yet dared through the fog. Her presence was commanding, every gesture sharp, decisive. David returned to the group, kneeling so his eyes were level with the children. "You hear those sirens? That's help arriving. You've all been so brave. Keep standing tall, just like you are now." He gave a small smile, genuine but measured. "We'll get through this together." Lucy tugged at Mia's sleeve again, whispering, "He's watching the bus so we don't have to." Her eyes flicked to Rex, whose amber gaze never strayed from the undercarriage, body stiff with vigilance. David followed her gaze, nodding silently. The dog was a soldier in his own right. The minutes dragged. Cold air gnawed at skin and nerves alike. The children shifted, their whimpers filling the silence between sirens. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a crow cawed, harsh and discordant. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. David's radio crackled again. "Officer Cole, additional units inbound. State EOD confirmed. ETA now 30 minutes. Maintain current protocol." He acknowledged with a clipped, "Copy," his eyes scanning the scene, his heart heavy but steady. And so they waited. David with his calm that bordered on defiance. Rex with his body wound tight as a drawn bow, the children clinging to adults who masked their own fear. The blinking diode beneath the bus continued its silent countdown, each flash marking time in a way none of them could ignore. Every minute felt like an hour, every sound magnified. The morning had become a crucible, testing courage, patience, and faith on a fog-choked road in Aspen Hills. The minutes dragged on like hours as the fog thickened, coiling around the stranded bus, and the frightened children huddled near the fence. The red diode under the chassis pulsed steadily, an unblinking reminder of how fragile the moment was. David Cole kept moving between the group and the danger, his blue eyes cutting through the mist, searching not only for threats on the bus, but in the shadows beyond. Years of instinct told him danger seldom traveled alone. Rex stiffened suddenly, his body jerking toward the tree line beyond the road's shoulder. His ears shot forward, tail raised like a banner, and he barked, not at the bus this time, but toward the veil of fog where a darker shape lingered. His bark carried a new edge, not warning, but accusation. David followed the dog's gaze and saw it then, a small vehicle barely visible through the mist. It was an old white panel truck, paint chipped, wheel rims stained with rust. Its engine was off, but condensation still drifted faintly from the tailpipe, suggesting it had arrived only moments earlier. It sat too conveniently angled toward the bus, headlights extinguished but silhouette menacing. "Mark," David called, his tone sharp. Deputy Delgado was already moving, his broad frame purposeful, hand resting near his sidearm. Grace Holloway flanked him, green eyes narrowed, every step deliberate. Together they approached the truck, their boots crunching the gravel. David whistled once, sharp and clear, and Rex shot forward like a loosed arrow, his muscular body low, every sinew honed with intent. He stopped short of the truck, circling, growling deep, amber eyes blazing at the shadow behind the windshield. The driver's side door creaked open, and out stepped a man in his mid-30s, tall but wiry, with narrow shoulders that slumped forward as though he carried the weight of invisible chains. His hair was dark, stringy and unkempt, his skin pale with the kind of sallowness that comes from too many sleepless nights. A thin beard outlined his jaw, uneven and patchy, and his eyes, gray and restless, flicked nervously from the officers to the dog. "Hands where we can see them!" Grace barked, her voice cutting through the fog. The man froze, then slowly lifted his hands, a small black remote clutched in one. Delgado was on him in 2 strides, wrenching the device free with rough precision. The man stumbled, lips parting as though to speak, but Rex's growl silenced him. David stepped closer, studying the figure. The man's clothes were simple, a stained hoodie, jeans worn at the knees, boots caked with mud. Yet the remote in his hand was modern, sleek, and very much out of place. "What's your name?" David demanded, his voice controlled but sharp. The man licked his lips nervously before answering. "Neil? Neil Carter." Deputy Delgado cuffed him, the metallic click echoing in the mist. "Neil Carter, you're under arrest. Suspicion of planting an explosive device, attempted endangerment, and whatever else we find." Neil's face twisted, caught between defiance and fear. His voice cracked when he spoke. "I didn't mean to hurt them. This wasn't supposed to." Grace cut him off, her tone like a blade. "Save it. You were watching that bus. You had a remote in your hand." Explain that Neil's gray eyes darted toward the children in the distance, his voice trembling. "It wasn't about them. It's the system, the buses, the design flaws. They're death traps waiting to happen. No one listens unless you make them look." David's jaw tightened. "So you build a bomb? Strap it under a bus full of kids to make a point?" Neil shook his head violently, messy strands of hair falling over his forehead. "It wasn't live, not meant to kill. Just a test, a way to show how easy it is." A warning, his voice cracked again, somewhere between desperation and madness. "If they ignore me, children die later anyway. Better they see it now than bury them later. Delgado shoved him against the truck with controlled force, his face grim. Your warning could have blown a dozen kids to pieces. Don't pretend this is... Noble Rex barked sharply, the sound almost echoing Delgado's condemnation. The dog's hackles bristled, every part of him radiating contempt for the man before them. Neil Carter's hands shook in the cuffs, but his eyes hardened as he muttered, "No one listens until fear shouts." I just made it shout." David studied him quietly, the scar at his eye catching faint light. He'd seen men like this before, broken by conviction, twisted by loneliness, desperate to be heard. But the presence of that blinking diode under the bus erased any sympathy. Whether Neil believed it or not, he had crossed into terror. "Search the truck," David ordered. Grace moved swiftly, opening the side panel. Inside were boxes of wires, soldering kits, scraps of metal tubing, and handwritten notes scattered across the dashboard. Schematics of buses, diagrams circled in red, phrases scrawled in angry block letters, defective brakes, fire risk, ignore until dead. Grace's brows furrowed. Looks like he's been at this for months. Collecting, building, planning. Delgado lifted the confiscated remote, holding it carefully. "Bomb squad will confirm, but this is no toy." He had control. Neil's voice rose, cracking into a near shout. "It wasn't armed. I made sure. It wasn't live." His chest heaved, sweat breaking across his pale forehead. "I just needed someone to listen." David stepped closer, his voice low but searing. "You strapped fear under a bus of children. Whether it went off or not, you made them live those minutes. You made them believe they were seconds away from dying. That doesn't make you a whistleblower. It makes you a criminal." Neil sagged against the truck, breath shuddering. For a moment his eyes flicked to Rex, and perhaps he saw in the animal's unwavering stare the pure judgment of innocence betrayed. His lips parted as if to explain, but no words came. The fog swirled as if swallowing his silence. Delgado hauled him upright, marching him toward his cruiser. Grace collected the notes and remote, evidence of a plan warped by obsession. David lingered for a moment, his gaze fixed on the bus, on the children still waiting. He exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment pressing harder. Rex padded to his side, leaning lightly against his leg, amber eyes steady as though to remind him. The threat was found, the danger contained. For now. Behind them, the blinking diode still pulsed. The bomb remained real, live until the EOD team could neutralize it. But the shadow behind it, the man who placed it there, was no longer watching from the fog. He was in custody, his twisted reasoning laid bare. The children had been spared, but the morning carried scars. The revelation was clear. Someone had tried to make fear into a message, and he had chosen a school bus to write it on. The fog hung thick as steel wool, muffling every sound but the steady thrum of nerves. The children huddled by the fence in a protective knot, their eyes fixed on the yellow bus that still sat like a sleeping monster on the road. Deputies Mark Delgado and Grace Holloway kept their posts firm, while David Cole stood closest to the danger, his body taut, one hand resting firmly on Rex's harness. The German shepherd quivered with restrained urgency, eyes locked on the blinking diode beneath the bus. The distant wail of approaching sirens grew louder, soon followed by the harsh crunch of heavy tires on wet gravel. Out of the fog emerged a large armored truck, its sides marked with the state emblem. The back doors swung open, and the bomb disposal unit stepped into the gray light. Leading them was Sergeant Alan Pierce, a man of 50 with a frame thick from years of heavy armor and a face carved with the lines of tension. His graying hair was cropped short, his jaw shaded with salt and pepper stubble. His brown eyes were sharp, but behind them lay the fatigue of decades spent racing against clocks no one else could hear. A scar across his left cheek hinted at a blast survived years earlier, a scar that made his every word feel weighted with experience. Behind him followed technician Clara Nguyen, 32, of medium height, her black hair twisted into a tight bun beneath her helmet. Her skin was fair, her features delicate, but her posture was all precision and focus. Known for a calm that verged on unnerving, Clara had made her mark in the unit by defusing her first live device during training, a reputation she carried with quiet pride. Her green bomb suit seemed almost too large for her slender frame, but the steadiness of her steps erased any doubt. "Cole," Pierce barked, his voice gravel yet steady. "Status?" David gestured toward the rear of the bus. "Device strapped to the frame. Visible wires, diode blinking steady. Timer unknown. Suspects in custody." Pierce gave a curt nod, his eyes flicking to Rex. "That dog just bought us time." His voice softened for only a breath before the steel returned. "Now let's not waste it." Rex whined low, straining against David's grip as though urging them forward. David crouched, pressing a hand against the dog's neck. "Easy, partner. They've got it now." The children's sobs ebbed and rose like waves. Naomi Fields held the smaller boy tighter, whispering prayers under her breath. Lucy Garner's wide eyes never left Rex, her face pale but filled with awe at the dog's unrelenting focus. Mia Patterson kept her arms around both girls, her hazel eyes darting toward David with unspoken questions she dared not voice. Pierce and Clara knelt by the bus, their gloved hands moving with the care of surgeons. Clara slid a small camera beneath the chassis, the live feed flickering onto the portable monitor they carried. The screen revealed the device in grim clarity. Rectangular black box, wires coiled in deliberate order, a blinking diode pulsing like a heartbeat. Clara's voice was quiet but firm. Improvised but skillful. Pressure trigger with a timer backup. Whoever built this knew enough to be dangerous. David's gut clenched. He thought of Neil Carter's frantic words, his obsession with being heard. Dangerous obsession made dangerous devices. "How long?" Delgado asked, his usually steady voice carrying an edge. Clara's eyes narrowed at the feed. "Judging by the pulse rate, 5 minutes, maybe less." The words dropped like stones. Even the fog seemed to hold still. Pierce adjusted his gloves, his scar pulling taut as he spoke. "We've worked with less. Clara, Kit 3. Let's go." The next minutes blurred into a taut symphony of focus. Clara slid beneath the bus in her bomb suit, her breathing audible through the headset. Her hands moved with painstaking care, tracing wires, identifying circuits. Pierce guided her with clipped instructions, every syllable a balance of command and reassurance. David kept his eyes on Rex, feeling the dog's muscles tense with each bark that threatened to break free. "Stay," he whispered again, though the dog's amber eyes screamed urgency. To Rex, waiting was unbearable when danger hissed so close. The children whimpered louder when Clara's gloved hand hovered near the diode. The red blink accelerated, its rhythm quickening like the heart of a predator sensing prey. Clara froze, her green eyes narrowing in concentration. Sweat beaded along her hairline beneath the heavy helmet, sliding down her pale temple. "Talk to me, Clara," Pierce said softly. Her voice came measured, controlled. "It's got a secondary trigger tied to vibration. One wrong move and it's over." David clenched his jaw. Delgado muttered under his breath. "God help us." Grace Holloway kept her face impassive, but her hands flexed at her sides, betraying the pressure. Seconds stretched. Clara inhaled slowly, isolating a single wire. Blue, coiled beneath the others. Her fingers closed around it. "This one," she whispered. "Cut here and it lives." Cut wrong, and so do we. Rex barked suddenly, sharp and commanding, his body lunging forward as though sensing the climax. David tightened his grip, murmuring steady words, but his eyes darted to Clara. The dog's instincts throbbed through the silence like a drum. Clara steadied her hands. 3, 2, 1. The cutter snapped through the wire. The diode blinked once more, then died. Silence followed, heavier than any sound. Clara slid out from beneath the bus, pulling off her helmet. Her pale face broke into the faintest smile, exhaustion etched across her delicate features. Device neutralized. A collective gasp turned into a flood of relief. Children cried openly, but this time with release rather than terror. Mia hugged Lucy and Naomi to her chest, her own tears spilling freely. Walter. Briggs staggered back against the fence, muttering thanks under his breath. Delgado exhaled a long breath, shoulders slumping with relief, while Grace closed her eyes for a second, allowing herself that fleeting victory. David knelt beside Rex, burying his hand in the thick sable fur. "You were right all along, partner." Rex licked his hand once, his amber eyes finally softening, tension dissolving into the fog. Pierce looked around, his scar deepening with his grin. "Ladies and gentlemen, that was closer than I'd like. But thanks to that dog and some steady hands, everyone gets to go home." The road fell quiet again, but this time the silence carried gratitude rather than dread. The fog that had once clung to Aspen Hills like a shroud began to lift in the days after the bomb scare, leaving behind a town forever changed. News spread quickly. Parents whispered prayers of thanks, and children who had once thought of Rex as just a dog now spoke of him in hushed reverence, like a guardian angel cloaked in fur. The fear that had gripped the valley was replaced by gratitude, a collective recognition that sometimes salvation comes not from men in uniforms, but from the instincts of a loyal animal. 1 week later, the town gathered in the gymnasium of Aspen Hills Elementary School, a modest brick building with peeling paint on its shutters and banners of hand-drawn art still taped across the hallway walls. The floor smelled faintly of wax and chalk, and the stage, normally reserved for school plays and science fairs, had been dressed in patriotic bunting. Folding chairs lined the polished wood, filled with townsfolk eager to honor the unlikely hero. At the center sat Officer David Cole, dressed in his formal uniform, the silver badge on his chest gleaming beneath the fluorescent lights. His tall, sturdy frame seemed even more solemn in this setting, his jaw tight as he scanned the crowd. Beside him, Rex lay stretched out, his sable coat brushed to a glossy sheen. The dog's ears twitched at every sound, but his amber eyes were calm, surveying the room with the quiet authority of one who already knew his place in their hearts. Children craned their necks to see him, whispering to one another with awe. On stage, Principal Dana Moore, a woman in her early 50s, stood at the podium. Tall and lean, with graying blonde hair cut neatly at her shoulders, she wore a burgundy blazer and spectacles that gave her an air of stern competence. She had a reputation for discipline, but also for deep compassion, having spent 30 years guiding students with equal parts steel and warmth. Her green eyes shone with emotion as she addressed the room. "Last week," Dana began, her voice strong but trembling slightly, "we faced a danger that could have ended in tragedy. But thanks to courage, vigilance, and instincts sharper than any of us could imagine, our children came home safe." She paused, letting her gaze fall on Rex. "This German shepherd, Rex, reminded us that sometimes heroes do not carry weapons or wear uniforms. Sometimes, they simply bark loud enough for us to listen. A ripple of applause spread through the crowd, hesitant at first, then swelling until the room echoed with clapping hands and stomping feet. The children's cheers rose higher than all, shrill but full of pure joy. At the front row sat Rachel Caldwell, editor of the small-town newsletter, her brown hair swept into a neat bun. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, petite but commanding in presence. Rachel had been the first to publish the story with Lucy Garner's video attached, transforming the local incident into a headline that reached state papers. She leaned forward now, snapping photos with her camera, her expression proud but calculating, already thinking about how to tell this chapter of their town's story. Dana lifted a small silver plaque from a box on the podium. The engraving gleamed beneath the stage lights. Guardian of Life, awarded to Rex, Aspen Hill's protector. Her voice grew softer as she held it aloft. On behalf of this school, this town, and every parent who now sleeps easier, we honor Rex as the Guardian of Life. The applause thundered again as David led Rex onto the stage. The dog stood with a dignified stillness, his head held high, ears forward. David accepted the plaque with one hand, his other resting on Rex's back. His voice, deep and steady, carried across the hall. If not for Rex, today would be a story of mourning. Instead, it is a story of deliverance. He trusted his instincts when we might have hesitated. He carried a message none of us could hear, and he made us listen. He paused, his eyes glistening as he looked down at his partner. If there is a miracle here, it came in the form of this dog. Tears welled in the eyes of parents in the crowd. Mia Patterson sat among them, her slender hands clasped tightly in her lap, her hazel eyes shining as she watched Rex. Beside her, little Lucy Garner leaned forward, her freckles bright against her pale cheeks, whispering to Naomi Fields, "I told you he saved us." Naomi squeezed her hand in agreement, both girls smiling through damp lashes. At the back of the room, Deputy Mark Delgado stood with his arms crossed, his rugged face softened by pride, while Grace Holloway's green eyes glimmered with approval. Even Sergeant Pierce and Clara Nguyen had returned for the occasion, standing tall in the corner, their presence a reminder that science and bravery worked hand in hand. When the applause finally faded, David gave a small command, and Rex lowered himself to the ground at his master's feet. The dog's eyes half closed, his breathing slow, content to rest amid the noise of human gratitude. He was not a creature of ceremony, only of instinct and loyalty. Yet in that moment, every eye in the hall saw him not as a mere animal, but as a vessel of grace, an answer to prayers whispered in the fog. The ceremony ended with a prayer led by Pastor Whitmore, a white-haired man with a gentle voice who reminded the crowd that blessings often come in forms we least expect. "God sent us a protector," he said, lifting a hand toward Rex. "And through him, he reminded us to never ignore the quiet warnings of faith, loyalty, and love." As the townsfolk filtered out of the gymnasium, their voices lifted in gratitude, David lingered on stage with Rex at his side. He knelt, rubbing the dog's thick fur. Rex gazed up at him, amber eyes steady, reflecting trust and devotion. And in that simple exchange, a man and his dog beneath the fading echo of applause, lay the heart of their story. The town of Aspen Hills would never forget the day fog nearly swallowed its children, nor the loyal guardian who refused to let danger pass. And as Rex curled at David's boots, eyes soft, tail twitching gently, he embodied the quiet miracle they had all witnessed. Salvation wrapped in fur, loyalty, and the unwavering courage of a German shepherd. Sometimes God's miracles do not arrive with thunder in the sky or angels in shining robes. Sometimes they come quietly, through the loyalty of a dog who refuses to move, through the courage of a child who dares to believe, or through the steady hands of people who choose faith over fear. Rex was not just a German shepherd. He was a vessel of grace, a reminder that the Lord can work through the simplest of His creations to protect lives and awaken hearts. And in our own daily lives, miracles may be closer than we think, in a kind word that heals, in patience that spares anger, in love that shields us from despair. When we pause long enough to listen, to our conscience, to each other, and to God, we may hear warnings, guidance, and hope we would otherwise overlook. May the story of Rex remind us to trust in God's quiet interventions and to never take for granted the guardians He places along our path. If this story touched your heart, please share it with others, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel so more people can witness stories of faith, courage, and miracles. May God bless you and your loved ones with peace, protection, and unwavering hope.